then I have my relationships, and they do think so.
At 91 years old, Shirley MacLaine has seen it all in Hollywood. She's an Oscar-winning actress, best-selling author, and someone who has never been afraid to speak her mind. After nearly 8 decades in the movie business, she's finally ready to talk openly about some of the most difficult men she worked with during her long career. In a rare and honest interview, MacLaine shared stories about 7 male actors who made her work life challenging. These weren't just minor disagreements or creative differences. These were men whose behavior ranged from unprofessional to downright cruel. Some had massive egos, others showed complete disrespect, and a few were just mean-spirited. MacLaine has decided it's time to tell the truth about what really happened behind the scenes. Dean Martin, the absent partner. Dean Martin was known for his smooth charm and his role in the famous Rat Pack, but working with him was far from smooth, according to MacLaine. She remembers him showing up to work drunk more often than he showed up sober. When he wasn't drunk, he seemed emotionally distant and uninterested in the work they were doing together. You'd be waiting for a scene to click, waiting for some kind of connection, and all you'd get was that smirking lounge act smile, MacLaine recalled. While that smile might have worked great at parties with his famous friends, it didn't help when they were trying to create believable characters on screen. MacLaine described acting with Martin as performing opposite someone who was sleepwalking. He would deliver his lines with mechanical smoothness, like a singer going through the motions of a song he'd performed 1,000 times before. But acting, MacLaine explains, is supposed to be like a conversation between two people. You throw the ball, you expect the other person to catch it and throw it back, she said. With Dean, sometimes it felt like the ball just landed on the floor. For someone like MacLaine, who poured her heart into every performance, this lack of engagement was particularly frustrating. She tried to find truth and emotion in every scene, but when her scene partner was just coasting on his natural charm, it left her feeling like she was acting into empty space. MacLaine thinks Martin's disinterest might have come from deeper problems. Maybe he was burned out, dealing with personal grief, or perhaps acting was never really what he wanted to do with his life. He loved music, he loved golf, he loved hanging out with his friends, she said. But I don't think he ever loved acting. He did it because it was expected of him, because it came easy. There were occasional moments when Martin would surprise everyone with a perfectly timed look or an unexpected gentleness in the way he said a line. But these moments were rare and unpredictable. It was like waiting for lightning to strike, MacLaine said, and most of the time the clouds just passed over. Despite her frustrations, MacLaine admitted that Martin had something special that couldn't be taught. People enjoyed watching him even when he wasn't giving his best effort. That's the frustrating part, she said. He could have been so much more. She sometimes wanted to shake him awake, not just for the sake of their performances, but for the person she knew was hiding inside him. Anthony Quinn, the dominating force. Anthony Quinn presented a different kind of challenge. He wore his masculinity like armor, and MacLaine found it exhausting to work around. Quinn had a larger-than-life personality that was loud and aggressively self-assured. He walked onto movie sets like he was doing everyone a favor just by showing up. According to MacLaine, Quinn was openly dismissive of most people on set, including her and other cast members. He rarely took direction from directors seriously. It seemed like the only authority he recognized was his own. Directors would give him notes about how to improve a scene, and he would nod politely, then go ahead and do whatever he wanted anyway. Rehearsals were particularly difficult with Quinn around. MacLaine remembered him frequently interrupting her lines, talking over her, or suddenly changing where he was supposed to stand during a scene without warning anyone. He didn't see women as equals and he didn't bother hiding it, she said. He thought if he steamrolled his way through a performance, no one would notice the lack of depth. MacLaine emphasized that this wasn't just about sexism, though that was certainly part of it. It was about entitlement. Quinn seemed to think everything was a performance designed to impress the crew, the director, and most importantly, his own ego. She shared a specific memory from a 1960s movie set that perfectly illustrated Quinn's attitude. During an important emotional scene where her character was supposed to confront his with quiet, simmering intensity, Quinn decided to go in a completely different direction. Instead of matching her subtle approach, he raised his voice, took up more space, and physically crowded her in the camera frame. When Mlan asked the director if they could adjust the scene to create more balance and intimacy, Quinn dismissed her concerns. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll carry the scene," he told her. Mlan remembered thinking, "You're not carrying anything but your ego." Despite Quinn's undeniable talent and screen presence, Mlan found working with him more draining than inspiring. He had charisma, sure. He knew how to fill a screen, but filling a screen isn't the same as sharing it, she explained. And he never truly shared a scene with you. He just occupied it. Over time, Mlan learned how to stand her ground around men like Quinn. You have to, when you're around men like that. They'll bulldoze you otherwise, she said. So I learned to push back, not just for myself, but for the integrity of the work. You can't make real art if you're constantly fighting for basic respect. Looking back, Mlan thinks Quinn's aggressive behavior might have come from fear. I think he was afraid of vulnerability, afraid that if he let his guard down, he wouldn't be enough. So, he overcompensated. And maybe that was the real tragedy. Not that he was difficult, but that he never trusted anyone enough to just be human. Robert Mitchum, The Bitter Presence. Robert Mitchum had what Mlan called a dangerous allure. He had that lazy, smoldering look and a voice like gravel mixed with whiskey. His screen presence was undeniable, but what audiences didn't see was how bitter he could be when the cameras stopped rolling. There was this constant undercurrent of resentment with Bob, Mlan explained. He walked around like the world had done him wrong, like every moment spent acting was somehow beneath him. Mitchum seemed to think the industry owed him not just respect, but complete submission. When he didn't get what he felt he deserved, he would punish everyone around him with his indifference. Working with Mitchum felt like walking through a minefield of unpredictable moods. Every scene became a battle between his apathy and contempt. Mlan would try to create something honest and emotionally true, but Mitchum would undercut her efforts with a smirk, a muttered insult, or just complete disengagement. He made everyone feel small just so he could feel large, she said. Mitchum rarely spoke unless it was to make a sarcastic comment or question whether a scene was even necessary. When directors gave him notes, he would roll his eyes. If a script called for him to show vulnerability, he would act like it was all a joke. And if another actor had an important moment in a scene, he would find a way to suck the energy out of it, usually by acting like none of it mattered. Mlan described the atmosphere on set as emotionally paralyzing, especially for actors who weren't as experienced or willing to fight back. There was a heaviness whenever he walked into a room, she said. It wasn't about fear exactly. It was more like dread, like you knew the temperature would drop, the tension would rise, and whatever good energy had been building would just evaporate. Despite all of this, Mlan acknowledged that Mitchum had moments of brilliance that reminded everyone why he had become a legend. When he decided to emotionally engage with a scene, he could be magnetic in a way that was truly unique. There was no one quite like him when he decided to show up emotionally, she said. But those moments were so rare. They felt like accidents. Mlan tried to understand where Mitchum's bitterness came from. She recognized that he was a product of a brutal era in Hollywood when men weren't allowed to be soft, to ask for help, or to show pain. So they drank, they lashed out, they carried this armor of bitterness, she explained. I think he was deeply unhappy. And the tragedy is that he never let himself heal. She concluded her thoughts about Mitchum with a mix of frustration and sadness. Talent doesn't excuse behavior, but it does make you mourn the loss more acutely because you see what could have been, what he could have been, if he just let himself be vulnerable. Frank Sinatra, the transactional charmer. When it came to Frank Sinatra, MacLaine was blunt. I never trusted Frank. He could be charming, absolutely, but it was transactional. It was charm with strings attached. If you weren't useful to him in that moment, you didn't exist. MacLaine wasn't denying Sinatra's famous magnetism. No one could deny that. But she refused to romanticize it the way many others did. Sinatra had a way of making people feel like they were the only person in the room. But that feeling never lasted. And then the next day, you'd be invisible, she said. It all depended on what he needed from you, and whether you were willing to go along with his rules. For someone like MacLaine, who valued honesty and artistic collaboration, Sinatra's emotional hot and cold treatment was not just exhausting but harmful to the work they were trying to do together. She remembered one particularly tense film shoot where Sinatra's behavior constantly threatened to derail the entire production. He stormed off set more than once, she recalled. Just walked right out when things didn't go his way. It could be over anything. A line reading, the lighting, a delay in filming. The man didn't like being told what to do. Not by directors, not by co-stars, and certainly not by a woman. What struck MacLaine most wasn't just Sinatra's unpredictable behavior, but the way everyone around him enabled it. There was an entire system of producers, assistants, and hangers-on whose only job seemed to be keeping Sinatra comfortable and happy. They'd scrambled to adjust everything for Frank, she said. It was like he was royalty, and we were all just there to orbit around him. This imbalance affected both professional and personal interactions. MacLaine felt like she could never have a real conversation with Sinatra because everything was filtered through power dynamics. He believed power was a right, not a responsibility, she explained. And when someone lives that way for too long, they stop seeing people. They only see tools or obstacles. Despite all her criticisms, MacLaine acknowledged Sinatra's incredible talent and cultural impact. He could deliver a song or a line with such nuance, it would stop you cold. That was real, she said. But the cost of that brilliance was this atmosphere of tension, of walking on eggshells. The work suffered for it, and so did the people. MacLaine noted that Sinatra had his loyal followers, people who worshipped him, and were rewarded for that loyalty if it served his purposes. But God help you if you pushed back. If you tried to meet him as an equal, especially as a woman, he'd make sure you knew your place. Her final assessment of working with Sinatra was clear and uncompromising. I've worked with difficult people before. I've even respected some of them. But Frank, I don't miss working with him. Not for a second. You can admire someone's talent and still know they weren't good for you or for anyone else. Warren Beatty, The Broken Promise. When MacLaine talked about Warren Beatty, her voice became softer, tinged with something that sounded like genuine regret. This one hurts, she admitted. Warren had promise, no doubt, but he was insufferable about it. For MacLaine, the memory of working with Beatty was more complicated than her experiences with the others. There had been early friendship, even admiration, and for a time she truly believed in his potential, not just as an actor, but as a creative force in Hollywood. He was electric in the beginning, she said. Sharp, ambitious, undeniably talented. You could see it in flashes, the way he shaped a scene, the instincts he had for story and timing. But talent, when not tempered by humility, can curdle into something ugly. And with Beatty, that's exactly what happened. The main problem with Beatty, according to MacLaine, was that he couldn't share the spotlight with anyone. Everything had to orbit around him. Scripts, camera angles, even conversation. You'd be mid-sentence, mid-thought, and he'd steer the moment back to himself like gravity pulling everything toward the sun. Except in this case, the sun burned too hot and too fast. What disappointed MacLaine most wasn't just Beatty's ego or his frustrating behavior. It was deeper than that. She had seen what he was capable of, and watched it twist under the weight of his own self-importance. There's nothing wrong with confidence, But Warren took it to a level that left no space for anyone else. Collaboration became control. Input became interference. You never quite knew whether he was listening or just waiting to speak. She remembered times on movie sets when creative decisions turned into standoffs because Beatty had to win no matter what the cost. And it wasn't about the best idea, it was about his idea, she said. He'd question the director, override blocking, rewrite scenes on the fly. And if you didn't go along with it, you were the problem. Even in casual conversation, Beatty's need to dominate every situation was relentless. You could feel him performing even when no one was watching, MacLaine observed. Despite all her frustrations, MacLaine never denied Beatty's brilliance. He was brilliant and broken, she said quietly. That's what made it so tragic. You wanted to root for him. You wanted to believe he could rise above himself, but he never did. Or maybe he couldn't. When asked if she would ever work with Beatty again, MacLaine didn't hesitate. No, not even for the best script in the world. Some lessons don't need repeating. You can care about someone's gifts and still protect yourself from their chaos. She paused, then added with lingering sadness, I wanted him to be the man his potential promised. But sometimes potential is just that. A promise never kept. Charlton Heston. The God complex. MacLaine's assessment of Charlton Heston was sharp and unforgiving. God complex. That's what he had. He thought he was Moses, even when the cameras stopped rolling. For MacLaine, working with Heston was like stepping into a cathedral where only one person was allowed to speak. Everything was sacred to him. Every line, every pause, every piece of blocking. But not in a way that invited others to participate. It wasn't about elevating the material, it was about elevating himself, she explained. She described Heston as condescending and humorless, especially when other actors tried to bring spontaneity or warmth to a scene. You try to bring something light, something human into the moment, and he'd bulldoze it with gravitas and self-importance. It was like trying to dance with a statue. What might have appeared as strength on camera often came across as rigid inflexibility in real life. The man never met a mirror he didn't love, MacLaine added with a wry smile. And I don't just mean physically. He was in love with his own moral reflection. There was little room for genuine collaboration when working with Heston. Suggestions were often met with patronizing nods or long-winded speeches about the higher purpose of the scene, the film or cinema itself. He spoke like he was delivering a message from God, she said. Even when we were just doing a basic two-person dialogue, he'd carry himself like he was descending from Mount Sinai. Heston's sense of righteousness extended beyond the movie set. It affected everything. How crew members were expected to address him, where his chair was placed, what kind of water was in his trailer. If anything fell short of his expectations, he took it as a personal insult to the sanctity of his presence. Despite his stature and critical acclaim, MacLaine found working with him deeply frustrating. There was no give, no curiosity, no sense of play. Acting is about listening, reacting, being surprised. But with him, it felt like everything had already been decided in his head. Your job was just to orbit around his choices. She acknowledged that Heston's performances had a power that audiences responded to. There's something to be said for conviction, for certainty. He had that in spades, but it came at the cost of real connection. He didn't act with you, he acted at you. When asked if there had ever been a moment of breakthrough, between them, MacLaine shook her head. Not really. I don't think he ever saw me. Not truly. He saw a co-star, a line partner, maybe even a rival, but never an equal. She paused, then finished. Great actor, terrible collaborator. There's a difference. Steve McQueen. Too cool for connection. Steve McQueen represented yet another type of challenge for MacLaine. Steve was cool, too cool for connection, she said, her voice carrying both admiration and quiet frustration. The world saw McQueen as the ultimate rebel, A man with a motorcycle, a distinctive squint, and an aura of danger that translated perfectly to the screen. But for MacLaine, who had to work alongside him, that veneer of effortless cool came with a significant cost. He had edge, he had style, but emotionally there was a void, she explained. Though she respected his precision and screen presence, she found herself constantly searching for something deeper during their scenes together. Something human, vulnerable, and real. He didn't talk. He didn't engage. And when he did, it was clipped and cold. I don't think he ever listened, really. Not in the way you hope a scene partner will. There was no sense of give and take, no curiosity, just stone. MacLaine believed that McQueen's emotional distance was completely intentional. He had complete control over how much of himself he let people see, and the answer was not much. Everything felt calculated, every movement, every word. You could admire the control, sure I did, but it made real connection almost impossible. She compared acting with McQueen to dancing with a locked door. You'd step in, open yourself up, offer a moment, and there'd be nothing back. No flicker of recognition, no surprise, no response, just that impenetrable stillness. And while it worked beautifully on camera, it left you as a scene partner feeling like you were acting in a vacuum. Despite her frustrations, MacLaine didn't question McQueen's magnetism. He had a natural camera sense, a kind of internal rhythm that made him hypnotic to watch. But that rhythm didn't include anyone else. It was like he was performing a solo no matter how many people were in the frame. The distance remained even when they weren't filming. He wasn't unkind, just inaccessible. You'd try to talk to him between takes and get one-word answers, maybe a nod. He didn't waste energy on small talk, on bonding, on anything that felt messy or emotional. It was all about control. What puzzled MacLaine most was how someone who barely let anyone get close to him could move audiences so powerfully. "That's the mystery of Steve McQueen," she said. "He barely let anyone in. Yet millions of people felt like they knew him. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe people projected what they wanted onto him. But I never got past that wall." Would she work with him again? Professionally, yes, because he delivered. But personally, I'd rather act with someone who meets you halfway, who wants to build something together, not just guard their own space. She paused, then added with a wry smile, "He was cool, no doubt, but cool gets cold real fast when you're looking for heat." A mirror to Hollywood's past. Shirley MacLaine has always been more than just a movie star. She's been a witness to Hollywood's changing face. And now, in her 9th decade, she's offering a clear reflection of what she saw behind the curtain. "You don't make it this long by pretending everything was fine," she said in conclusion. "Some of it was ugly. Some of them were, too." Her willingness to speak honestly about these experiences isn't just about settling old scores or getting revenge. It's about telling the truth about an industry that often preferred comfortable myths to uncomfortable realities. For MacLaine, who has lived through nearly 8 decades of Hollywood's evolution, honesty has always been more important than politeness. These stories reveal not just the personal challenges of working with difficult people, but the broader patterns of behavior that were often tolerated or even encouraged in Hollywood's golden age. From Dean Martin's emotional absence to Frank Sinatra's transactional charm, from Anthony Quinn's domineering attitude to Warren Beatty's broken promise, these accounts paint a picture of an industry where talent often excused behavior that would be unacceptable in any other workplace. At 91, Shirley MacLaine has earned the right to speak her truth. And in doing so, she's given us a valuable glimpse behind the glamorous facade of Hollywood's past, reminding us that even the most talented people can be deeply flawed human beings.